listening, squirrels? Forgot to do the lights. I guess I could do these back here, though. That one appears to need new batteries. And I forgot to just replace. I have to get up to do those. Oh, we ain't doing that. The hernia has reared its ugly whatever again a while ago, so just getting over an attack. And I was sitting here playing with this. I don't know if you can see the sparklies. It's a beautiful tonal blue and sparkly that I'm knitting. Oops, just found an extra. Yeah, because the stitch marker's in there. Okay, I got mixed up on the chapter, so I think we're on chapter 6, halfway, or part 2 anyway. But Tuppence, let me make sure I'm in the right place. Yeah, I shall have to be careful, I see, remarked Tommy. It was the last thing I read. But Tuppence was deep in thought and refused to be drawn. What were the Cecils like? She asked suddenly. What sort of things did people say about them? As far as I could make out, they were very popular. He and his wife were supposed to be devoted to one another. That's what makes the business of the girl so odd. It's the last thing you'd have expected of a man like Cecil. He was an ex-soldier, you know, came into a good bit of money, retired, and went into this insurance business. The last man in the world, apparently, whom you would have suspected of being a crook. Is it absolutely certain he was a crook? Couldn't it have been the other two who took the money? The Hollabys? They say they're ruined. Oh, they say. Perhaps they've got it all in a bank under another name. I put it foolishly, I dare say, but you know what I mean. Suppose they'd been speculating with the money for some time, unbeknownst to Cecil, and lost it all. It might be jolly convenient for them that Cecil died just when he did. Tommy tapped the photograph of Mr. Hollaby Sr. with his fingernail. So you're accusing this respectable gentleman of murdering his friend and partner? You forget that he parted from Cecil on the links in full view of Bernard and Lecky, and spent the evening in the Dormy house. Besides, you forget the hat pin. Bother the hat pin, said Tuppence impatiently. That hat pin, you think, points to the crime having been committed by a woman? Naturally, don't you agree? No, men are notoriously old-fashioned. It takes them ages to rid themselves of preconceived ideas. They associate hat pins and hair pins with the female sex and call them women's weapons. They may have been in the past, but they're both rather out of date now. Well, I haven't had a hat pin or a hair pin for the last 4 years. Then you think that it was a man killed Cecil. The hat pin was used to make it seem a woman's crime. There's something in what you say, Tuppence, said Tommy slowly. It's extraordinary how things seem to straighten themselves out when you talk a thing over. Tuppence nodded. Everything must be logical if you look at it the right way. And remember what Harriet once said about the amateur point of view, that it had the intimacy we know something about people like Captain Cecil and his wife. We know what they're likely to do and what they're not likely to do, and we've each got our special knowledge. Tommy smiled. You mean, he said, that you're an authority on what people with bobbed and shingled heads are likely to have in their possession. and that you have an intimate acquaintance with what wives are likely to feel and do? Something of the sort. And what about me? What is my special knowledge? Do husbands pick up girls, etc.? No, said Tuppence gravely. You know the course you've been on. You know the course you've been on, not as a detective searching for clues, but as a golfer. You know about golf and what's likely to put a man off his game. It must have been something pretty serious to put Cecil off his game, his handicaps too. And from the seventh tee on, he played like a child, so they say. Who say? Bernard and Lecky. They were playing just behind him, you remember. That was after he met the woman, the tall woman in brown. They saw him speaking to her, didn't they? Yes, at least, Tommy broke off. Tuppence looked up at him and was puzzled. He was staring at the piece of string in his fingers, but staring with the eyes of one who sees something very different. Tommy, what is it? Be quiet, Tuppence. I'm playing the 6th hole at Sunninghill. Cecil and old Hollaby are holing out on the 6th green ahead of me. It's getting dusk, but I can see that bright blue coat of Cecil's clearly enough. And on the footpath to the left of me, there's a woman coming along. She hasn't crossed from the ladies' course. That's on the right. I should have seen her if she had done so, and it's odd I didn't see her on the footpath before from the 5th tee, for instance. He paused. You said just now I knew the course, Tuppence. Just behind the 6th tee, there's a little hut or shelter made of turf. Anyone could wait in there until the right moment came. They could change their appearance there. Tell me, Tuppence, this is where your special knowledge comes in again. Would it be very difficult for a man to look like a woman and then change back to being a man again? Could he wear a skirt over +4s, for instance? Certainly he could. The woman would look a bit bulky, that would be all. A longish brown skirt, say, a brown sweater of the kind that both men and women wear, and a woman's felt hat with a bunch of side curls attached each side. That would be all that was needed. I'm speaking, of course, of what would pass at a distance, which I take to be what you're driving at. Switch off the skirt, take off the hat and curls, and put on a man's cap, which you could carry rolled up in your hand, and there you'd be, back as a man again. And the time required for the transformation from woman to man, 1.5 minutes. At the outside, probably a good deal less. The other way about would take longer. You'd have to arrange the hat and curls a bit, and the skirt would stick getting it on over the +4s. That doesn't worry me. It's the time for the first that matters. As I tell you, I'm playing the 6th hole. The woman in brown has reached the 7th tee now. She crosses it and waits. Cecil in his blue coat goes toward her. They stand together a minute, then they follow the path around the trees out of sight. Hollaby is on the tee alone. 2 or 3 minutes pass. I'm on the green now. The man in the blue coat comes back and drives off, foozling badly. The fight's getting worse. I and my partner go on. Ahead of us are those two Cecil, slicing and topping and doing everything he shouldn't do. At the 8th green, I see him stride off and vanish down the slip. What happened to him to make him play like a different man? The woman in brown, or the man, if you think it was a man. Exactly, and where they were standing out of sight, remember, of those coming after them, there's a deep tangle of furze bushes. You could thrust a body in there, it would be pretty certain to die, hidden until the morning. Tommy, you think it was then? But someone would have heard. Heard what? The doctors agreed death must have been instantaneous. I've seen men killed instantaneously in the war. They don't cry out as a rule, just a gurgle or a moan, perhaps just a sigh, a funny little cough. Cecil comes towards the seventh tee, and the woman comes forward and speaks to him. He recognizes her, perhaps, as a man he knows, masquerading, curious to learn the why and wherefore. He allows himself to be drawn along the footpath, out of sight. One stab with the deadly hat pin as they walk along. Cecil falls dead. The other man drags his body into the furze bushes, strips off the blue coat, then sheds his own skirt and hat and curls. He puts on Cecil's well-known blue coat and cap and strides back to the tee. 3 minutes would do it. The others behind can't see his face, only the peculiar blue coat they know so well. They never doubt that it's Cecil, but he doesn't play Cecil's brand of golf. They all say he played like a different man. Of course he did. He was a different man. But point number 2, his action in bringing the girl down there was the action of a different man. It wasn't Cecil who met Doris Evans at cinema and induced her to come down to Sunning Hall. It was a man calling himself Cecil. Remember, Doris Evans wasn't arrested until a fortnight after the crime. She never saw the body. If she had, she might have bewildered everyone by declaring that that wasn't the man who took her out on the golf links that night and spoke so wildly of suicide. It was a carefully laid plot. The girl invited down for Wednesday, when Cecil's house would be empty. Then the hat pin, which pointed to its being a woman's doing. The murderer meets the girl, takes her into the bungalow and gives her supper, then takes her out on the links, and when he gets to the scene of the crime, brandishes his revolver and scares the fife out of her. Once she has taken to her heels, all he has to do is pull out the body and leave it lying on the tree. The revolver he chucks into the bushes. Then he makes a neat parcel of the skirt and hat. Now, I admit I'm guessing, in all probability, walks to Walking, which is only about 6 or 7 miles away, and goes back to town from there. Wait a minute, said Tuppence. There's one thing you haven't explained. What about Hollaby? Hollaby? Yes, I admit that people behind couldn't have seen whether it was really Cecil or not. But you can't tell me that the man who was playing with them was so hypnotized by the blue coat that he never looked at his face. My dear old thing, said Tommy, that's just the point. Hollaby knew all right. You see, I'm adopting your theory that Hollaby and his son were the real embezzlers. The murderer's got to be a man who knew Cecil pretty well. Knew, for instance, about the servants being always out on Wednesday and that his wife was away. And also, someone who was able to get an impression of Cecil's latchkey. I think Hollaby Jr. would fulfill all those requirements. He's about the same age and height as Cecil, and they were both clean-shaven men. Doris Evans probably saw several photographs of the murdered man reproduced in the papers, but as you yourself observed, one can just see that it's a man, and that's about all. Didn't she ever see young Hollaby in court? That's just it. The son never appeared in the case at all. Why should he? He had no evidence to give. It was old Hollaby with his irreproachable alibi who stood in the limelight throughout. Nobody has even bothered to inquire what the son was doing that particular evening. It all fits in, admitted Tuppence. She paused a minute and then asked, "Are you going to tell all this to the police?" "I don't know if they'd listen." "They'd listen, all right," said an unexpected voice behind him. Tommy swung round to confront Inspector Marriott. The inspector was sitting at the next table. In front of him was a poached egg. often drop in here to lunch, said Inspector Marriott. As I was saying, we'll listen. All right. In fact, I've been listening. I don't mind telling you that we've not been quite satisfied all along over those porcupine figures. You see, we've had our suspicions of those hollybees, but nothing to go upon, too sharp for us. Then this murder came, and that seemed to upset all our ideas. But thanks to you and the lady, sir, we'll confront young Hollaby and Doris Evans and see if she recognizes him. I rather fancy she will. That's a very ingenious idea of yours about the blue coat. I'll see that Blunt's brilliant detectives get the credit for it. You're a nice man, Inspector Marriott, said Tuppence gratefully. We think of a lot of you two at the Yard, replied the stolid gentleman. You'd be surprised. If I may ask you, sir, what's the meaning of that piece of string? Nothing, said Tommy, stuffing it into his pocket, a bad habit of mine. As to the cheesecake and milk, I'm on a diet. Nervous dyspepsia. Busy men are always martyrs to it. Ah, said the detective, I thought perhaps you'd been reading. Well, it's of no consequence. But the inspector's eyes twinkled. And that's all of chapter 6. I think I'll stop there. Chapter 7's called The House of Lurking Death. Ooh. I'd read more, but like I said, I had a tummy attack a while ago and hadn't gotten diddly squat done, so I'm going to try to get in here and do something. Do some stitching. I love y'all. Have a good night. And see you around the YT streets. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.